So Season 2 of Arena Breakout Infinite released earlier this month, and with it brought a handful of new weapons, one of which I think is actually one of the best weapons in the game now, and that's the MK14, which is a marksman rifle, but you can make this weapon go fully automatic, and it uses 7.62 by 5.1 rounds, meaning you could use M61 in this. So in this video, I want to go over the best possible builds for this weapon. And while this weapon is incredibly strong, it's also quite expensive. The base of this weapon is really expensive, so you can't even really make a cheap version of this weapon. So generally, you're going to want to be using this pretty much as full builds and with at least some decent ammo. So starting off, you only have two options for magazines. You have 20 and 30 rounders. I would probably recommend using 30 rounders just because they're still pretty cheap. And for how expensive this is, you're just going to want 30 rounders. Again, you can go fully automatic, even though I think it is actually better to stay in semi-auto for this weapon. You don't have any options for pistol grips. You don't have any options for stocks. And our sight is going to be on the dedicated MK14 rail that just goes on top, and you can put any sight you want on it. I would probably recommend having some variable zoom sight because this is a 7.62 by 5.1 rifle. You can definitely be sniping people at further ranges. When I was actually using this, I would generally be using the 1x 4x sight. This is just one of my favorite sights in the game, and it's generally not expensive compared to some of the other sights. You don't have any different options for the body of the rifle, and then if you want a tactile device, you're going to be putting a 2.5-inch modular lock rail on it, and you can put any tactile device you want on it. And then for the front grip, we're going to be using the 4.1-inch modular lock rail with the lightweight tactical vertical front grip. Now this thing is incredibly expensive. If you're trying to do the best possible, you can use it, but if you want to get a little worse stats but save a lot of money, I would generally just recommend going with the lightweight tilt front grip. It's going to reduce your ergo, your horizontal and vertical recoil, but it's only around 15k compared to the average 100k for this front grip. But if you want the best possible build, this is the grip you're going to have to use, and it's just ridiculously expensive. Then we have our muzzle devices, and you have different options depending on if you want to go loud or silent. So if you want to go silent, you're going to be using the 7.62 by 5.1 flash suppressor adapter with the 7.62 by 5.1 lightweight suppressor. If you want to save a lot, you can just go with the MK14 suppressor. You lose 5 horizontal recoil, 3 vertical recoil, but it's only 17k. You'll be saving a lot with that. And then if for whatever reason you want to go loud, you're going to be using the AR-10 muzzle flash suppressor. This doesn't give you any more vertical recoil. It gives you some more ergo, and its average price is only like 6k, so you'll save a lot with that if you want to go loud. This weapon is absurdly loud, even though it sounds really cool, so just keep that in mind. I would generally recommend you go suppressed. And that's the entirety of the best build for this weapon. It's very simple to build. You're only putting on a few different parts really, but the stats it has with these parts is actually pretty good. At 69 vertical recoil, 73 horizontal, 39 ergo is a little bit low, but not too bad with a weapon like this. You could also switch to a 20 round mag if you want a little bit more ergo and if you're going to be sitting in semi-auto instead of fully auto. But that brings us to our ammo. So you have a good amount of options for the 7.62 by 5.1 caliber. You have your white rounds you're basically never going to use. You have your BPZ, which isn't super expensive for a weapon that isn't going to be spewing out as much ammo as other calibers at 720 a round right now. Now these are level 3 penning, but they have pretty good base damage. Their armor damage is pretty decent. So this is a viable option, even though with how expensive this weapon is, I would generally recommend it not using this and at least using tier 4 penning ammo. Now if you say you're going to use a cheap sight, the cheaper silencer, and a much cheaper grip, that'll massively reduce the price of this weapon build. So you could use BPZ with that, but the base of the weapon is just so expensive. I would at least recommend using M80s, which are 1300 a piece, but they have pretty much the same base damage. They have much higher pen, much higher armor damage. M80s are generally going to be pretty good. Then you get to the just absurdly expensive ammos. You have M62, which is class 5 penning, lower base damage, but much higher armor damage and penetration. Then you have the ridiculousness M61 that are 23,000 1,000 a piece right now. Ridiculously expensive. Class 6 penning, 50 base damage, so actually a pretty low base damage compared to the other ammos. Crazy high armor damage, crazy high penetration. If you're using a full built version of this weapon and you want to spend the money on M61, if you hit people, you're definitely going to be killing them very quickly. If you're not trying to spend ridiculous money, M80s is actually a pretty good middle point. But that's the best build for the MK14. This is a really fun weapon to use with this season. Again, it's incredibly strong. You can go fully automatic with it, which is crazy with this caliber, but it can be a bit wild to control even with the best build on fully auto. I would actually recommend, unless you're super close range, to just keep it on semi-auto. It's much more controllable on semi-auto, but because of the caliber, you're doing a lot higher damage. You're usually going to have a lot higher pen because you're probably going to be using higher tier ammo, so you're still going to be able to shoot decently quickly and kill people very quickly even without fully auto. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.